Getting clients in the United States can be a challenge, especially for freelancers that don't live here. Well, today's guest has some great advice for all freelancers. Frank Lora has made more than $600,000 on Upwork and shares some great tips on how to effectively communicate with potential clients, especially if you live outside the US. Let's hear what he has to say. Francisco, welcome to the show, or should I say Frank, actually, right? You like to go by Frank?
I prefer Frank, but if you want to call me Francisco, it's not a big deal.
Very cool. So I really appreciate you being on here because I'm going to tell you, your stats on Upwork are very impressive. I mean, just on your page alone, it shows over 600,000 in business you've collected. So I really want to learn kind of how you got started, what kind of made you successful on the platform.
Cool. Yeah. I mean, I've been doing it for a long time. And I think that's part of the whole recipe is just kind of being on the platform for a long time and just being consistent about it. I'm not the type of person who will just sit for the first week, and if I don't get success, I quit. That's what I see with a lot of freelancers. And so that's kind of the main ingredient to the whole thing.
It's just that consistency, showing up, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Just like business, just like being a professional at anything, for sure.
So it's interesting because you are a developer by skill set, and you actually built a tool to help other Upwork freelancers, which is great. And I want to kind of get into some of the things that, really drive your thinking about the freelancer ecosystem, what freelancers should and should not be doing. And so one of the things that I really want to talk about, because I know your tool does it, our tool does too, is about proposal generation. Okay. I'd really like to get your thoughts on proposals, or what they're called in Upwork, cover letters. What do you really think about them? Because I think that's a really important part of your system, my system, and a lot of people struggle with it.
Sure. Yeah. So I do think that people give way too much importance to like how proposals are created and how many proposals you should send. And I think they're important, don't get me wrong, but I think people just give way too much importance to that, where I think the most important thing is your actual skill set and your experience. And the reason why I say that is because I've messed around with a bunch of different types of proposals, different lengths, different language, different tones, and they've all pretty much worked. It's really just because the client feels that, I'm an actual human who can deliver the work and yeah, that I have the right skills to do so. And yeah, we do have kind of similar tools, and we use AI to basically create cover letters that are specifically tailored to a specific post. And I know people are going to say, hey, you shouldn't use AI to submit proposals. But I completely disagree. I use it every single day of my life, and it's continued to work for me, and it will continue to work for me in the future. So those are just my thoughts on it.
No, I agree with you, obviously, but I also think too, if you are a foreign freelancer, which there's a lot, I mean, only 25% of freelancers on Upwork are in the United States. The majority are outside the United States. And I do think writing assistance is something that we in America are like, well, everybody should write perfectly. And that's not always the case. So I do think they are very helpful. I do think it's also helpful that you can edit them, because even as you pointed out, it's really about your skills, experience, trying to understand what the client really needs and finding a way to engage with them, but not being like, hey, I can do WordPress. Well, lots of people can do WordPress. What's unique about what you do to help that client with their need, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me piggyback off that, because there's a couple of things that I think make a pretty good proposal. And one of them is your experience and some of the work that you've, I guess some of your portfolio. If you can show that to them and make sure that you've done the work, that's absolutely critical to a good proposal. And that's really all you need. You can even write in conversational language like we're having now, and you don't have to overthink it. But yeah, if you write it with AI, it's pretty beneficial for you to, obviously review it and edit what you have to edit. And then for those foreign freelancers, and I guess we'll talk about this a little later as well, but that I think is the most important thing. I've posted jobs on Upwork myself as a client, and it's pretty remarkable how many people just submit proposals with wrong language, right? And it makes it seem like if you can't understand what I am trying to get out of this as a client, how was it possible that you were going to help me? So yeah, language is a pretty important thing. I think freelancers who are foreign need to just perfect the English language. There's no other way around it.
Now, one thing, and I agree with you on everything that you said, but I do think there is some importance in the first two lines of your cover letter, because that is what is disclosed out there. I mean, like you, we have posted jobs out there. We've hired plenty of freelancers out there. And I will say that, if they have a relatively good job success score, if they, I don't really look at earnings as much, but I do look like, are they top rated, any of the badges they throw out there. But then I kind of want to see what that first line is and see if they actually read the damn thing. Because so many times, and I think you've seen this as well, it's like, hi, I'm Sean. I am a WordPress expert. You better, hire me. And you're like, well, did you even read what I said? Because I was talking about how I want to go from WordPress to Webflow. What are you talking about? So talk to us about those first couple of sentences in the cover letter.
Sure. Yeah. So it's interesting because some proposals or some job postings, they specifically ask you to kind of write a specific, either word or a phrase to make sure that you've read the entire thing. But if not, I think it always makes sense to somehow incorporate some sort of a human element to the first couple lines and make sure that you reference the job post. So if you have a job post from, about going from WordPress to Webflow, you want to make sure that you're like, hey, I've done this a couple different times. Here is the link to this specific Webflow site that I migrated from WordPress. And then you can go along and then you state your experience. I've experienced with different types of first couple lines in the proposal. And I don't know, a couple have worked for me, but the ones that work the best is what you just referenced, making sure that it references the actual job posting for sure.
Absolutely. Well, what goes along with sending cover letters is inevitably you're going to see the basic amount of connects that you have to use, or sometimes you have to boost, right? And I know in your space, because we're in the technical space as well, some of those connects I see people complaining about 8 connects. I know for a fact I've been on work where we spent hundreds of connects because the job was so lucrative out there. So I know a lot of freelancers kind of complain about connects, but I think you may have a different take.
I do. And the reason is because, I'm a contrarian by nature, And when other people zig, I zag. And I kind of like the fact that, you sort of have to treat Upwork like a business, right? So you have to spend a couple $100s on connects. And even if that only leads to maybe 2 jobs, well, you want to kind of do the math and make sure that provides a good ROI. If you're just throwing out connects for no reason, I don't think that makes any sense. But for people like you and I that have a pretty good ROI, it makes sense to spend hundreds of dollars on connects, because that's just what it is now, right? A lot of jobs are 16 connects without bidding on it. And even the bidding system, I think, is a pretty good way, not only for Upwork to make money, but for you to make money as well. And also, one thing that I think people don't talk about enough is that the more active you are on Upwork, meaning the more jobs you apply to, the more money you spend on connects, Upwork is going to take that into account, because after all, it is an algorithm, right? So just think about it from a developer's perspective. The algorithm should take that into account. People who are spending more money on Upwork, people who are being more active on Upwork, people who have good job success scores, people who have videos on their profile, that all plays a part in your rankings. And basically, if you're going to get jobs or not, that's just what I found over years of testing.
I don't have any hard data that what you're saying is correct, but I have a lot of anecdotal data from freelancers that we've talked to and worked with. And they say, just being active, I'm finding more people inviting me to jobs, right? Just being, engaging, sending out more proposals. In fact, I was talking to one customer and he was like, yeah, I send out a lot of proposals, but I'm getting more invites because I'm sending out proposals, not necessarily people replying. So I think you're 100% correct. And I would definitely back that up with anecdotal data. Let's talk about boosting, though, in particular, because in certain categories, in the technical fields, their clients will spend a lot of money, right? Because the jobs and the complexity of the work requires sometimes 4 or 5, even 6 figures to get the job complete. But I do know that the boosting strategy, because I've seen contrarian points of view. Don't worry about boosting, just be the first one there. Boost no matter what, because it's a cost of doing business. So what do you think about boosting in general?
So it's interesting, because when I first saw the whole boosting feature, I thought, and I was going to experiment. I thought that I didn't really need to have to boost given my profile on Upwork. But as I've been looking at the data, and I think you have to be pretty results and data driven when you make these types of decisions, I've noticed that boosting, I just get more views, period. And that's a sad reality, but you just have to take it for what it is and go along with it. I've been boosting a lot more than I have in the past, and I have a couple different strategies when it comes to boosting. If for example a project costs $16 to apply for, but the connects to show up on the top 4 spots, they go up to like 25, then I'll boost. But if it's at 100, then I'll typically refrain from boosting because you're not always going to get that job, and the data doesn't support me, and it doesn't really the ROI isn't there in terms of boosting 100 connects, for example.
Right.
But if it's like 30 or so, I recommend do it. It depends on how much money you have to spend though. So you gotta weigh the odds type thing. And
I agree.
That's how I've been doing it. Yeah.
And I think for filtering standpoint, you really kind of want to look at the client's profile too, right?
Absolutely.
If they are actively engaged, if they're spending lots, there's a high probability they are someone who is hiring, right? Then, that's, I think, a trade-off why you should spend sometimes to boost, because this is a sought after client, right? And the other thing too, and I think people don't realize this, we boost a lot, but not every boost is accepted. Sometimes we get outbid and then they come back to your account. So yeah, you have to spend let's say 16 connects to apply, but let's say you spend 50 connects. Well, if you're not the top one, then they don't actually open your profile. If they don't actually open your cover letter, you get those connects back. So, even though you budget for a couple hundred a month, you may find you don't spend all of it because of the way the boosting system works.
That's absolutely true. It's funny because the other day I was just looking at my connects history, and I just had a bunch. Oh, this job was canceled. A bunch of different reasons for why I got refunded those connects. And you also have to think about, because that comes back to you, right? So if a job is not, if someone doesn't hire for a specific job, you'll get those back. So that's a pretty good point you made. Yeah.
So, at the end of the day, right, we do need to engage with people. And I noticed on your profile, you had a video. And I will say that it's interesting to me because I think maybe we're some of the few out there doing video. So what's your point about video in general, whether it's on the profile, talking to a client? How do you see video now in our post-COVID world?
Yeah, so I think video is probably the single most important thing that you should have on your profile, right? And it's interesting because people say they have videos, but when I go look at their videos, it's just like an edited video without them speaking or without them letting the client know that, hey, I'm an actual human. I'm not a fraudster. I am who I say I am, and I know exactly what I'm doing. It's funny because not many people do that, and that's the one thing I recommend to every single person. And then when you're scheduling an interview, for example, you better get on video, because that also builds trust with the client. I see so many people getting on interview calls and they just don't get on video. They just use their voice and they block out the camera. So if you don't have a camera, invest in one, because we're talking about ROI earlier. That's pretty high ROI in my opinion. You can't be successful without a video on your profile, in my opinion.
So I want to tell you a story. I think you'll appreciate it. We had a job out there that we were looking for a developer, and we had obviously a lot of people applying to it. But one in particular stood out because the profile had a person who was in Austin, Texas, right? And he looked kind of like me. But then so I said, I want to do a video call. So we get on the video call, but it's not him on there. It's somebody from China who is on the call, mimicking what the guy is saying on the audio side, but they were not in sync. It was the most bizarre. And they said they're in Austin, Texas. Well, I'm in Dallas, Texas. I spend a lot of time in Austin. And so when I said, how are those Aggies doing down there in Austin? Well, any Texan knows that Texas A&M is not in Austin. It's the University of Texas. So it was one of those things that, I think now clients are seeing things like this. And I think if you don't get on video and somebody does, I am way more inclined to talk to someone on video. And because we're trying to do, and I think this is your point, we're trying to build trust, right?
Yep, absolutely. Right. So, if someone knows that I match the picture on my profile and that I say who I am. And if I'm in Miami, I can talk about the Hurricanes or the Miami Dolphins or whatever the case is. I have some culture about Miami in me. Then that builds trust, and then you're more likely. You're probably 10 times more likely to get the job. But yeah, that's a pretty funny story. There's a bunch. I don't want to have to say this, but there's you come across a lot of fraudsters even on Upwork, but they've done a great job at trying to kind of get rid of all that. So, but it's gonna,
Yes.
It's everywhere, right? It's on social media, spam everywhere. So, but they've done a good job. Yeah.
So obviously you've done a ton of work on the platform, and you also have a tool that you built out there. And I'll definitely put a link to that tool so our audience can take a look at it. But what was kind of your thinking around tools in general? Because I know why we built a tool, but I'm going to take this time to talk a little shop with a fellow developer and say, so what kind of would led you to the idea why you felt you needed to build a tool versus just copying and pasting or however process you were putting together?
Yeah, so originally I had sort of a Google Doc or a Notion doc or whatever with a bunch of the templates that I used to use, to apply for jobs. And that really took a lot of time, right? I would have to just adjust it. I wouldn't just copy and paste it, of course. I would just, copy and paste it, edit it, and make sure that, it was tailored to the job. But that's a time suck, right? So I wanted to build a tool that'll help streamline the process, right? So it'll help you create proposals. It'll help you respond to job interviews. It'll help you respond to even feedback, right? So all these little things, all these administrative things that you have to do as an Upwork sort of business owner, I wanted to streamline that process, and I'm sure you guys did too. So that's really the reason why I built it.
Yeah, I think this is like you. We built the tool for ourselves, and then we saw value in providing it to other freelancers. And I think that the reality is that it does take work. And if we can streamline processes, right, then that means we can do more client work, right, or just have more free time, which is the whole point of freelancing. So I think at the end, our impetus for creation is in line, and certainly really appreciate you being on today's show and sharing your wisdom, your experience with us. I can't thank you enough. So where should people reach out to you? How should people get in touch with you?
Cool. Thank you for having me, number one. And you guys can follow me on Twitter, Frank Lora 0524. I believe my handle is. I don't know it off the top of my head. I think that's it. And then I'll also leave a link to my Upwork profile because, it's good for people to see what type of, how I structure my profile, and hopefully that could help other people. And I'm kind of glad that you guys are also have a tool out there, because that's kind of putting people on notice that, hey, tools, you got to make use of tools. It'll help you save time. It'll help you more free, like you said. That's right. Yeah, they just work. They honestly just work. So,
well, I believe a rising tide lifts all boats, and it's better to be in a group of people than to be on an island by yourself. So
there's enough food for everyone, like I said. So.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate your time, Frank. Thank you so much. And we'll put links to all your profile information in the show notes. Really appreciate it.
Appreciate it, Sean. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for watching the video. And if you're not already subscribed, please go ahead and subscribe to our channel here. More importantly, if you found it useful, please share it with your friends. And one more thing, if you're looking for some great tools to help you succeed on Upwork, go check out 𝗬𝗪𝗓.ai. We think you'll like it.